And now, our feature presentation.
You are watching a master at work.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rafael Chacín, as known as El Capitán Rafucho, and welcome to a special episode of Civil on Black Experience. No bullshit, no drama, no filter, just Raiders, baby. And right now, we have some special guests right now you might know as the Raiders Unrivaled, which is Big C and Raider Demus. Because today's episode right now, we can talk about who got the best and the worst picks at the front of the history of the Raiders organization. Because right now, for this draft right now, because we're headed to the corner at the draft 2024 at the city of Michigan, which is at Detroit. And then we got to figure it out who got the best and worst draft picks during the organization right now. So let's give it like a warm welcome once again to Big C and, of course, Raider Demus. So how you feeling about that guy? Because this is like one of those, this is like the third time that we connected about you guys. So this is like the third time that I came like to see like a special guest right now. So how you feel about it?
I am really excited about the draft coming up. There's a lot of really good prospects in the first round.
Yeah.
And no matter who the Raiders go with, I think it'll be a pretty good choice. There's not a lot of bad choices in the first round for the Raiders.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take it enough for the comments right now. So let's see, NorCal Raider Jesse's in the building. Also, Raider Peña's in the building. So right now, the episode is going to be focused around for the draft right now. So let's just keep like who got the best draft class in the fall history and who got the worst about it. So I just figured it out because during the all conversation, because if you see like the draft class of 2007 and 2020, it became like the worst of the organization. And then we just figured it out how big and important about for those draft picks, because some draft picks are very good, some draft picks are very bad. Because take it for example, Josh Jacobs became like so like an incredible person, and he became like one of the best running backs ever in the franchise of the Raiders, doing for all these years. And then we just got Max Crosby, Derek Carr, Khalil Mack. Also, they just got for anything what happens. So right now, let's just get it about who got the best draft class and who got the worst draft class. So let's just start with Big C and Raider Demus, who had the best draft class in the whole history of the Raiders organization.
Are you muted, Biggs? Can't hear you.
I think you made it.
I was yelling,
yeah.
Capitán Rafucho. I was saying, thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to be back with you. And I was muted the whole time. I am dumb.
Oh, man.
I was muted too. I unmuted myself though.
I didn't. I was so busy just basking. I didn't even notice. You want to lead off, Tyler?
I absolutely will. I want to start with the worst draft class in the history of the Raiders. For me, it's a toss-up between 2009 and 2017. 2017 was really bad, but I'm going to start with 2009 first. Let me get to Raiders.com history of the draft. 2009, let me read who the Raiders drafted in 2009. There's one player worth an absolute damn in this entire draft. Darius Hayward-Bay, of course, was taken in the first round. Mike Mitchell was taken in the second round. Mike Mitchell actually turned into a decent player for the Pittsburgh Steelers down the line, but he was not very good for the Raiders. So that's a 1-2 punch of absolute misery for the Raiders. The third round, they got Matt Shaughnessy, defensive end out of Wisconsin. In the fourth round, out of Florida, they drafted Louis Murphy, a wide receiver, who actually was quite good. And he's the actual good player they got out of that draft. Also, in the fourth round, they got Slade Norris, linebacker at Oregon State. In the sixth, they got Striker Sulak, defensive end from Missouri, and also in the sixth, they got Brandon Myers, tight end out of Iowa, who I believe was okay for a couple of years. But that was a time the Raiders were, they had Jamarcus Russell still on the team. They needed a shot in the arm, and they absolutely did not get it. Al Davis, that was one of the last drafts that he was involved in, and he absolutely fumbled the bag, as he was known to do in the latter stages of his career. Now, when Al Davis was gone, of course, we had another front office takeover. And in 2017, we had this draft. We had our first rounder, Gary Conley, cornerback out of Ohio State. Second round, Obi Melifonwu, safety out of Connecticut. Third round, Eddie Vanderdoes, defensive tackle from UCLA. Fourth round, David Sharp, tackle out of Florida. Fifth round, Markel Lee, linebacker out of Wake Forest, who was actually quite good. We're not going to besmirch him. In the seventh round, we had Shalom Luani, safety out of Washington State, who was also pretty good and was on special teams and as a really good special teamer for a few years. In our second seventh rounder, we had four of them. The second one was Jalen Ware, offensive tackle out of Alabama State, who never did much of anything. I believe they called him the Dancing Bear at one point, and he never really was one. Another seventh rounder was Elijah Hood, running back out of North Carolina. I had huge high hopes for it because he was really good in college, never amounted to much. And we also had Trayvon Hester, defensive tackle out of Toledo, who never did much of anything. So that's just another one of the reasons why that front office is no longer with us anymore. But I want to point out the one draft that particular front office had that was amazing and is, in fact, the greatest class in the history of the Raiders and one of the greatest classes in the history of football. And that's 2014. Man. The 2014 class goes like this. Number one pick overall, Khalil Mack out of Buffalo. Number two pick in the second round, we got Derek Carr out of Fresno State. Our third pick,
legend,
Gabe Jackson, guard out of Mississippi State. Fourth pick, Justin Ellis, defensive tackle out of Louisiana Tech. The second pick in the fourth round that we had was Keith McGill, cornerback out of Utah. He didn't amount to a lot, but he was a good special teamer for a while. In the seventh round, we got TJ Carey, who was really good for the Raiders and also really good for the Browns for several years. In also the seventh round, we got Shelby Harris, who's still wreaking havoc in the league right now, defensive end out of Illinois State. And also the seventh round, we got Jonathan Dowling, safety out of Western Kentucky, who never amounted to much, but he was the last pick for us in the seventh round. So you don't expect too much. But 2014 is one of those legendary classes that every team hopes to have, but not many teams actually achieve. So, for the Raiders to have, a class like that where, nobody from the team, from that draft class is still on the team 10 years later, but it was the foundation of some of the success they're having now.
And it took Shelby Harris a couple of years to actually come to fruition. I love me some Jelly Ellis. That was a fantastic draft. So I'm on that page with you. You want me to go? Is it my turn?
Go ahead.
All right. Since we're starting with worst classes, I'm going to have to go with the 2005 draft. Before I get to what really makes that the worst draft class, let's get into some of the later picks. We had a 1, a 2, 2 3s, and 3 6s. So Norv Turner was doing some shucking and jiving at some point. We drafted Pete McMahon, who nobody's ever heard of and, didn't know at the time. We drafted Ryan Riddle, defensive end. I don't know if he ever recorded a sack in the NFL. Antaj Hawthorne. So bad I miss his name. Defensive tackle. There was one gem, and that was a linebacker named Kirk Morrison, and he was taken in the third round. In the third round, our first pick in the third round was a young quarterback out of Arkansas that I had huge hopes for. His name was Andrew Walter.
Arizona State, not Arkansas.
Arizona State. Sorry. I was mixing him up with the other guy.
Tyler Wilson, I imagine.
Tyler Wilson. Yeah. Okay. Defensive back Stanford Rout was our second round pick. Never really did much. He was pretty much an open door for wide receivers. What makes this class the absolute worst is that our quarterback at the time that we were going to roll with in the brilliant mind of Norv Turner was Kerry Collins. And there was a young quarterback out of Cal, formerly of Butte College in nearby Oroville, Chico area, Pleasant Valley High School in Chico. That man was supposed to be a very high pick in the top 10, ostensibly to the 49ers, and he fell down the draft board until he got to pick 24. The Raiders had the 23rd pick, so they were just one of many teams that passed on Aaron Rodgers. But who did we take instead of taking Aaron Rodgers, who could have completely turned the franchise around and done his quarterback Super Bowl Hall of Fame dance in silver and black? We took Fabian Washington.
How would be his name?
Fabian Washington. Unbelievable. The worst. All right. I'm going to
There
stop
you go.
yelling. I'm going to stop yelling.
Yeah, don't worry about that. And let's see for the comments right now that they say Avocasi rated. They say 2012, 2020 were horrible. Also, they got another comment that say 2007, they just got Zach Miller, Michael Bush, Johnny Lee, who has a great punt returner, and Mario Henderson was a depth guy. So we just flame out Jamarcus, but those four guys are very good, which is very good right now. So salute to Raiders Rebel, has it going into everything. Also, Avocasi to say Shagnisi was a good player. Also, Avocasi to say that Brandon Myers played well in 2012. Also, Raider to say, wasn't that Del Rio's draft class, which is like a between the Jack Del Rio's draft class? I mean, they're gonna be happy a lot of this one. But when you're talking about for the draft class 2014 for the Raiders, I mean, they just got like two amazing players because the coach was Dennis Allen and Tony Soprano, which is like the record for 3 wins and 13 losses. And they just got Khalil Mack, Derek Carr. Also, they got Gabe Jackson, Justin Ells, Shelvin Harris. I mean, Khalil Mack was like a powerhouse. And looking for the combination between Derek Carr and Khalil Mack, it became like solid. It became like a great combination, great speed, great ability. But instead of about that, because right now Derek Carr is not here, because right now there's the New Orleans Saints and Khalil Mack. But the combination between Derek Carr and Khalil Mack is between like something incredible. I mean, look at what's with those guys right now. I mean, they have amazing chemistry. They have something that no one had to do about it. But I think that draft class between for the 2014, it became like very solid, but people didn't figure it out because right now it seems like there's like a over to hype out of those draft class right now, but it seems that they have it all solidified for all those positions right now. And Red's right to say like 2014, but yes, I agree with that. Also, though, right now we had another special guest right now because you might know as one of those greatest content creators that I know about this. So all right, so let's just give a warm welcome to my brother once again, Avocasi Raiders. So salute to y'all.
What up?
Howdy.
Hold on, gang. Thanks for having me on, Ralph. Sorry, I had to pull up one time. I love doing draft revisits and talking about how it all shaped out with the draft classes in recent history. So,
yeah, because this episode it's all dedicated for about who got the best draft class, who got the worst. Because last night I had like a blast between the Oakland Raiders Savage, Avocasi Raider, and then for Al Salem to make it like a very good sample about who got the best and the worst draft class. But I think that Avocasi, he just came like a great point about who got the best in the draft class in the whole time of the Raiders history, because people didn't forget about who got the best draft class in the whole Raiders history. Because in that point, because right now the best draft class that we're talking about it, which is it made like a lot of history, was 1978. It became like a historical first round at Edris decade, which is they have it amazing about it. And they just proclaimed like one of the best in franchise history. Also, they just got Ken Stable, as known as the Snake. And it's one of those two Raiders in the draft that shine for the Hall of Fame. The other tackle, which is Arshell, which is drafted at the 3rd round. Also, they got Mark Harbor, Charlie Smith, George Addison. But I think that 1968, it became like one of the best draft class in the whole time of history of the Raiders organization. But as a matter of fact, the 2020, it became like the worst of the worst because right now they just got Damon Arnett. I mean, people they want to forget about this nightmare because they just wanted to, because there are some players that have been good, but there's some players that have been so bad. I mean, last year we just got Tyree Wilson, Michael Mayer, Aaron O'Connor. Also, they just got important players. But I guarantee that last night, for the live stream talking about for the Raiders, we cannot let the same happen to the same mistake that we happened to Marcus Russell at the first round in 2007. Because right now we had the biggest nation in the whole world. Because we're not going to commit another mistake. Because right now we got Tom Telesco as an organization for the Raiders, because he had a lot of great experience, and Antonio Pierce. So he had brought a lot of mentalities. So please, I've got to tell you, please do not occur the same mistake at the first round picks, because right now it all depends for all of the defense. No matter what's happened, it's a cornerback, quarterback, and of course wide receiver. It all happens for the draft.
I want to talk about one time recently where the Raiders did have a giant mistake in the first round, and that was 2021. That was 3 years ago.
All right.
And they took Alex Leatherwood, offensive lineman out of Alabama, in the first round. But I remind everybody how bad they felt at the end of that night when we had Leatherwood and everyone else had good players and we didn't. And then the next day happened. And then the day after that happened. Let's go through the other players that were taken in 21. The second round, Trayvon Merrick. Third round, Malcolm Kuntz. Also third round, Divine Diablo. Then Tyree Gillespie, then Nate Hobbs, and then Jimmy Morrissey in the seventh. So we have Merrick, Kuntz, Diablo, and Hobbs, who are basically starters right now for the Raiders from that draft that looked so bad after the first round. And that's basically the foundation of our defense right now. So even if the first round is an absolute mistake and a total miss, you can still salvage it if you draft well the rest of it.
There you go.
Right. I recently just did a draft revisit from that 2021 live. And yeah, I mean, look, I did a live reaction to the Leatherwood pick. I was not happy at all. But then when we took Trayvon Morey, he was the guy that a lot of us, including myself, wanted in the first round. So to get him in the second round was great. And like, yeah, he played well in his first 2/3 of his rookie season. Then he kind of fell off until his third year. He had a third-year jump, much like those other guys, like Malcolm Kuntz, Divine Diablo, and Nate Hobbs. You know what I'm saying? Like all, have playing a big part in our defense currently and for our at least the next year or two. You know what I mean? So to get that many players on the defensive side of the ball from one draft class, I think that was one of the better defensive draft classes in recent history. But just to your point about like just because you burn out in the first round doesn't make the whole class a wash. I mean, I heard you talking about the 2007 class and highlighting that was one of the worst draft classes ever. Well, yeah, we did flame out very badly. It's very storied about how bad it was with Jamarcus Russell. But like when you look at the other guys, like I know you're kind of new to learning about the Raider history, Rafa. But like you look at Zach Miller, you look at Johnny Lee Higgins, a very good punt returner. Michael Bush, one of the better spellbacks we've had when Darren McFadden was at his prime. You know what I mean? Mario Henderson, a depth guy. That wasn't a bad draft class. I mean, Zach Miller was one of the best tight ends in the league. I don't know if you knew that, Rafa, but when he was around in my early days, he was a guy I noticed more often than not. So, yeah, we flamed out in spectacular fashion that year with our first rounder, but like the other guys that were able to pan out, like it doesn't make that whole class a wash, much like, say, 2020. You look at that class now. That class was a disaster. I mean, Amik Robertson being the only guy who lasted more than at least 3 seasons. All those other guys, none of them panned out. And you want to look at even further than that. Like, I don't know if you guys remember the 2012 draft class. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Let me read out some names. All right, Tony. I'll try and remember it from the top of the dome. So Tony Bergstrom. Remember we drafted that guy? Didn't amount to much. A depth guy at best. Miles Burris, I believe, was from that class, who's now an actor. I don't know if you guys knew that. Nope. Jack Crawford he did some things with the Cowboys, didn't do nada for us. Christu Belakidi, who the fuck is that guy? Jaron Kreiner did okay in preseason, never amounted to nothing. And Nathan Stupar, who we cut after, I think, maybe his preseason, but he actually went on to play for other teams. But in regards to what we got from that draft class, just about nada.
Now, I didn't want to count 2012 in my worst draft classes simply because we didn't have a first or second round pick. And I think we didn't because we traded him for Carson Palmer because of Hugh Jackson. So one man's stupidity and bad decisions led us to that. I don't necessarily think that any of these picks were bad at the time, except for maybe Christo Bilakidi. It was just a matter of circumstances at that point, and Reggie McKenzie doing what he could with what he had to work with, unfortunately for him.
I get that, but at the same time, like you got to make the best of what you got. I mean, you look at like some of the guys that have some of our better picks in recent history have been in those mid to late rounds, like Max Crosby, like Malcolm Kuntz, like Nate Hobbs, like Amik Robertson.
You know what I mean? You can find guys if you look well enough. And yeah, like Reggie McKenzie was trying to make the best of a bad situation. I remember those years. And with Dennis Allen. That's why I give Dennis, like, I'm not so critical on Dennis Allen. When people say Dennis Allen was horrible, he was bad, yes, but there was context to his bad. I mean, him and Reggie McKenzie were in charge of making chicken salad out of chicken shit. Not like Josh McDaniels, who had everything on the table going for him and turned what should have been us rolling to the playoffs into an absolute disaster. That, for me, was terrible. But yeah, I get your point. Exactly. But still, you can find value, in my opinion, in those mid to late rounds.
Mm-hmm. Also, we got another comment right now. Mm-hmm. All right, sorry about the interrupt. Also, we got another comment right now that say Raiders Rebel to say, I'm gonna have to go with the 2020 draft. We had 2 firsts, 3 of the round picks. I mean, that's very fair. Also, Mel Cabeza that's in the house right now. They say Mel Cabeza say 2020 draft, worst draft in the history and possibly NFL history. Also, Raiders Rebel to say Henry Ruggs, the third number 1, Demi Arnett, Lynn Bowder Jr., Brian Edwards, Stanley Muse, John Simpson, and the whole gem out of the bunch of Meg Robinson. That class was ass. Ass.
Wow. There are so many bad classes to choose from. The Raiders have been one of the worst drafting teams in the NFL over the last 20, 30 years. It's been absolutely pathetic. I'm surprised they've had as much success as they have, quite frankly, because they've been really, really bottom feeders as far as drafting goes.
I haven't smelled success in a long time, so I don't know what you're talking about. We've had some terrible general managers, and shout out to Al, but there was a period of time that he went through where his decision making was very much compromised, and it set us back quite a few decades. So,
right,
it's hard. And in fairness, retroactive drafting, you find every team has just lists and lists of duds. It's a crapshoot. It's hard to find really great players. How many players have we talked about? How many times have we talked about top 5 quarterbacks in drafts just flaming out? How many first rounders just never amounted to anything? It's circumstances happen, but still, Raiders do better.
I read all the time about people, getting mad and busting on Mark Davis for this or that, for his haircut, or for, getting the team out of Oakland, or, for whatever. But it's like, do you remember 2003 to 2012? Like, do you remember what Al Davis was like for the last 9-10 years of his life? Is that what you want? Because Mark Davis right now is basically Jesus compared to that. I don't want to go back to those years.
The fact that we're in Las Vegas has very little to do with Mark Davis, and it's all about Oakland. Look at the fact that they, in the last 5 years, have lost all 3 of their major league sports franchises. The Warriors are now in San Francisco, the Raiders are in Las Vegas, and the A's are going to be playing in Sacramento on their way to Vegas. That was Libby Schaff and Oakland, not necessarily Mark Davis. If they had been able to put something together with the city, they would have stayed.
Well, 2010 and 2011, those were fun years, man. So it wasn't all like, for the most part, it was a lean period. I get that. But like 2010, 2011, we had a fun roster, and it was a fun period. So it wasn't all doom and gloom. But for the most part, I do agree. Like, it wasn't the best of periods as a
2015 and 16 too.
2015, 2016. The 2015 was our building block to 2016. Mm-hmm. And what should have been 2017, but we all know how 2017 turned out. But that if we're talking about draft specifically, we haven't done as well as what would have been ideal. But like in the last 13, 14 years, like, we have found players like predominantly, from round 3 onwards, like, we just haven't really got it as well as what we could have and should have with our first rounders specifically. I mean, we hit it out of the ballpark 2014 with Khalil Mack, and other good first rounders being Amari Cooper. Yeah, he was inconsistent, but at his best, he was Very good. One of the best wide receivers in the game. Unfortunately, when he was with the Raiders, it just wasn't as consistent as what it would be ideal. Like he'd have 2 games where he would show up and be the best wide receiver and then look like the next coming of Tim Brown. And then he'd have a stretch of 2 games where it's just like, where are you? You know what I'm saying?
So doing some of my research, I found some honorable mention terrible draft classes. 1989, we had no picks before the 6th round. And out of the 5 guys we took, only 3 of them made the NFL, and only one of them had a career longer than 1 year. I mean, there are some absolute duds. Todd Marinovich, number 1, although that was the year we did get Nick Bell and Rocket Ismail, so it wasn't a total wash. And then, you got a Chester McLaughlin in 92. Yeah, and then a little bit later on, we had the draft class with Charles Woodson, which that was a money pick.
Oh yes,
I'm gonna go to my best draft, and with an honorable shout out to 1986. My friend Mike Wise was drafted out of UC Davis. But the 1987 draft, we got Bruce Wilkerson, who was an 11-year offensive lineman in the 2nd round. Running back Steve Smith, who stuck around for a 9-year career. That was the year that we drafted Steve Berline, and he wound up playing it for 14 years. That's not terrible.
Panthers legend Steve Berline.
Panthers legends and Raiders legend Steve Berline. John Giesick, who was a guard that played for 9 years. So you have a handful of guys that carved out very nice careers. But the highlight of that draft, with pick number 183, a moment of inspiration for Al Davis. He took former Auburn running back Bo Jackson with the 183rd pick in the draft because he had been the first round pick of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the year before and decided that he didn't want to play for Tampa Bay. So he withdrew himself and made him eligible again the following year. Nobody wanted to take a chance. So it wasn't until the 7th round that we finally said, okay, 183rd guy, Bo Jackson, and the rest is history.
And it was also the him wanting to go to baseball as well, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, the thing was that Tampa Bay owners Hugh Culverhouse, a notorious dickhead, decided that he wanted to make sure that Bo Jackson never played professional baseball. So what he did was he tricked Bo Jackson into taking a free plane ride to go visit the Tampa Bay Buccaneers before the draft. In doing so, he vacated Bo Jackson's eligibility to play college baseball, so he could never play baseball for Auburn again. Bo Jackson was so pissed off about that, he said, I will never play for the Buccaneers. Do not bother drafting me. The Buccaneers, led by Hugh Culverhouse, were not only mean, they were stupid, and they drafted Bo Jackson anyway. And he decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sign with the Kansas City Royals, and, you go screw yourself. I'll just go on to the next football draft. And that's what he did. Now Davis took him in 1987.
Mean and stupid is a terrible combination.
Really is.
We were talking, God, I hate being all doom and gloom, but we're talking 2020 was the worst draft class. I don't know if you guys have looked at the 20s. I just had to re-look at it. Like, my God, 2017. Yeesh, look at this.
Gary, was my
Obi Melifonwu, Eddie Vanderdoes, David Sharp, Markel Lee, Shalom Luani, Jalen Ware, Elijah Hood, and Trayvon Hester.
Yeah, that's the one that Raider Damas was talking about.
Oh, did you bring that up?
Yeah, that was the lead off.
Oh, okay, my bad. I must have missed. Oh my God.
I had such high hopes for Obi Melifonwu.
I did too. Do you remember that Mexico game in 2017? How bad he looked?
Yeah. I mean,
oh my God.
His brother wound up being a better player than him. It
was all-time bad. Like, I remember because I remember watching that game, and basically it was when he came on the field, I was excited to see him play. I was like, okay, it's his first chance, let's see what he can do. It was basically Tom Brady was literally eyeing him off. He's like, where's Obi? There he is. I'm throwing to whoever's over there, one-on-one, because he's going to catch it and he's going to make either a big gain or a touchdown. And sure enough, every single time that's what happened.
And they were moving wide receivers around to target him. It was ugly.
It was all-time bad.
Yeah, even the announcers were talking about that they were picking on Obi.
Yeah, he was literally looking at him like, where is? Oh, there he is.
Hot route is on Obi. It's terrible.
Yeah. Also, we just got up in another comments right now to say Raiders Rebel to say the same. We wasted 2 round first picks and picks with many picks for the first round of quarterback. We should have a stud class. Also, Raider Rumors in the building. Salute to your Raider Room. Also, Raiders Rebel to say my Nick Haas of this class is Dwight McClover for Arkansas. I got to check him out for anything first. Also, Raiders Rebel to say it's her so good to bleed silver and black. Hell yeah. Also, Raiders Bible to say Al Davis last 5 years where the draft classes set us back 10 years. I mean, I cannot understand. I understand about it. But if you're talking about for Charles Woodson, I mean, he was drafted overall and he had a nice career into injuries were down in 2002, 2005 seasons because he ran himself. I mean, more probably to safety nickel to a second half of that career because all that was like an incredible career because not only he was the winner of the Heisman Trophy because in that year in 98, they had the best of the draft class in quarterback because remember Randy Moss, Peyton Manning, also Charles Woodson, even that I just figured it out, he was very inducted and he was decided like the All-American Defensive Player of the Year because he just finished the college career with 16 interceptions versus Michigan State versus Ohio State. I mean, he was just like one of these greatest players in the whole history that the Raiders organization that just had. I mean, if they have it like in a career right now, it was very smart because also these teammates making it like it just very easy because right now from 2000 to 2002, it became like one of the best seasons that the Raiders they have. And thanks to Josh Woodson, also they just got very important players because it's like a guy who beating rivals and winning like the big championship or the national championship, but they just almost close to get like the Super Bowl, but they just lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, that could have happened. And what you're talking about for the draft number to the 2017, I mean, that was just like, oh my God. I keep even thinking about for the draft class for the Raiders. I mean, they just happen because right now they somehow have the worst place that you have because Garen Coney for Ohio State. I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, if you check it out, because there are some persons that they see because they have the people you say, oh, this is where the people is tagged, but it's gonna have the greatest of all time. I mean, there's like a ton of hype about the draft class, and they just wanted to see how everyone to see like a rough consensus of the draft of the league because they just had Corey Davis, Fournette. I mean, it's really hard to see because that's just a very distance. I mean, I'm not very sure about it because they were just pretty hyped up because there's still like too many people who were taking like wide receivers early, but I think that draft it's pretty much similar as with the worst, but because with running backs dominating for the top and other positions stretch pretty in, I mean, that could happen a lot. But at some point, the draft class between for the whole history, it became like some people had to go for the best, some people had to go for the worst. But I think 2007, it decides like what are the worst things that could happen in the NFL draft, and of course for the Raiders organization.
Well,
but I figured it out.
If we're talking about 2007, let's talk about that. If we draft Calvin Johnson instead of Jamarcus Russell, it's one of the best draft classes in Raider history.
Right? Yeah.
No question about it. It's just number one that made it go bad. Let's talk about a draft class that's fallen through the cracks here that no one's talked about. 2016. Mm-hmm. This was another Reggie McKenzie draft. Let's go through it. Carl Joseph, safety out of West Virginia. Jihad Ward, defensive end, Illinois. Shalik Calhoun, defensive end, Michigan State. Playoff legend Connor Cook, quarterback, Michigan State. DeAndre Washington, praise be to him, running back out of Texas.
He was that guy.
I love that guy. Corey James, linebacker out of Colorado State, and Vidal Alexander, guard from LSU. One guy out of that draft, DeAndre Washington, did anything. That is one of the reasons we are where we are today with the Raiders trying to get back to respectability. It's drafts like that.
Right. And just back to, you were talking about 2007. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Like, 2007 I think it gets a bad rap from you, Rafa, with people who are, like, if you look at the class and you actually watched Raider football back from 2007 onwards and maybe the next 5 years, you would see that there was guys in that draft class. Yes, Jamarcus Russell was an epic fail, but I brought up before, like, we were talking about like Zach Miller, Johnny Lee Higgins, Mario Henderson, Michael Bush. You know what I'm saying? If you'd add Calvin Johnson, to your point, to that draft class, that would have been one of the best Raider draft classes ever. But even after that, like Raider Rebels comment, he said the last 5 years of the draft class set us back 10 years. Yeah, that Jamarcus Russell picking him at number 1 set us back. I'll give you that.
But the problem was everybody had him. He was the consensus number 1.
Right.
So we kind of fell into that just by virtue of having that first pick in the draft, because whoever it had been was going to take Jamarcus Russell.
Right. And I get that. Like, to be honest, like, on paper, it was the right move, being that he was the best quarterback in the class. We were a quarterback needy team. You know what I mean? Like, hindsight's all good and great looking back and saying, yeah, because Calvin Johnson turned out to be one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. You know what I mean? But like, at that time, we needed a quarterback. We swung for what we thought was the best quarterback in the class. It turned out to be an epic fail. You know what I'm saying?
Just because the guy is the number 1 pick.
That comment saying that the last 5 years of Al Davis's life was, it set us back 10 years. Like, between 2007 and 2011, we found guys. You know what I mean? Like, the guys like Stefan Wisniewski, guys like Darren McFadden, guys like Shaughnessy. You know what I mean? Lamar Houston. Jared Veldheer
was
we
one I was
saying.
Jared probably the best draft pick of the last 3 years of Al Davis's life, besides maybe Terrell Pryor.
What's that?
Maybe I said Jared Veldheer is probably the best draft pick of the last 3 years of Al Davis's life, except for maybe Terrell Pryor, who was a pick in the in the secondary draft. Guys who don't go in the first.
The last 2 years, did you say?
2 or 3 years of Al Davis's life, I would say Veldheer was one of the best picks that he made. Veldheer is pretty underrated as far as Raiders.
I agree. Yeah, one of the best left tackles in recent history that we've had. Like, Donald Penn, Colton Miller, and then there's Jared Veldheer. Jared Veldheer, when he was healthy, was a beast.
But he didn't really blossom until he went to Arizona. One of my favorite things about retconning drafts is looking at the guys that we didn't draft. That's exactly why I count the 2007 draft as the worst for overlooking Aaron Rodgers. But if you look at 2017, not only were the picks bad, but the guys that we left on the board. So right after taking Gary and Conley, we didn't take Jabril Peppers, Tre'Davious White, David Njoku, or TJ Watt.
Yes.
What were we even doing?
Also, we just get another comment right now to the Say Raiders Rebel. What is your guys' thought that moving up for J-Day fight? I think Mark Davis really needs like a hit of the draft class. He needs a Charles Woodson or Marcus Allen type to pick of the first round. And of course, there's another comment that say, I think Quentin Mitchell is that guy with shell thoughts. Also, I remember this because I just investigated for the whole history, because there's like a horrible mention about for the draft class of the history of the Raiders nation. Also, we can never forget about who did, like Al Davis did in 1999 at the off season, because I know the Gruders was the second year as a head coordinator, but also they just got like one of the best, which is head of the greatest one, which is like it back to the 1990, which is like the last year of the 20th century. And it became like the second year for John Gruden as the coordinator, and Al Davis was general manager. And they just signed up for a 35-year-old journeyman, Rich Gannon, in February. Because on that draft night in April, they had a whole lot of stack room for quarterback, because picks 1, 2, 3 were all quarterbacks. Also, there's picks 11, 12, also quarterbacks. Also, with another pick, which is the 18, they just pick a lineman, which is Matt Stinkham, which is like an enduring bust. And the pick number 9, and they just pick up like a defensive end, which is Tony Bryan, who's very decent. But that point, they say they don't need to draft a quarterback, because there's a lot of free agents that are out there with play the best footwork with us. But don't be surprised if they're going to pick it up for the quarterback before April, before they go for the trenches. Because at that part for the draft of 1999, because they just went up for the season, 8 wins, 8 losses, but they just picked it up for Janowski at number 17, third quarter at 47. Both guys are apart for the Super Bowl run back in 2002, and it became like so surrealistic that nobody people can understand why Al Davis can really choose it about those power players to get into the Super Bowl run. Because imagine this. Because during 2000, 2001, 2002, it became like solid years for the Raiders' history, putting out for those power caliber players like Charles Woodson. Also, there's Rich Gannon. I mean, they had the best of the best. But
Tim
when just
Brown,
after
Jerry
they just
Rice.
lost, yeah, that's exactly. And after they just lost for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I mean, they just came like for a downhill. You just look at the sound for the dog right now, but I mean, it happened about it because everything about it because just ending up at this one because I know their career revival like Gannon is rare than hating for like a franchise quarterback, big enough catching up, lighting in the bottom they can. It's just like a horrible idea, especially like when they have the best two options are very likely to be like James Winston or Drew Lock. Because as an indicator for the future, it's not going to hit the worst right now because if they're going to need like a franchise quarterback and not the quarterback at the back end, because only then this fan base, they had to deserve it like a franchise quarterback and not something able to slot it up because there's not to slot it up because if they want to believe it up to destiny right now, because right now it seems that they have a lot of difficult right now because there's still a lot of holes about the defense, the offense, about for the special teams. I mean, the 2023, it became like very decent because they just had Tyree Wilson. Also, they just got Michael Mayer. Also, they just got Aiden O'Connor. But right now, there's still a lot of holes to fill in because right now, we're getting ahead for the draft right now. I mean, it just happened because between Quinton Mitchell, I mean, this guy I really thought because I thought with Quinton Mitchell, I mean, that guy, it became like very solid. But I think of it now because right now it feels like they need to improve a lot of things more about this, but it feels like they have a lot of different right because if you're talking about for Quinton Mitchell, I mean it's very possible because I think it's gonna move it a try because it's getting like a great option for currently the pass rusher. I mean, he runs down with a 30-yard because unless he had the slips to the down but anything because there's like the difference between because he runs like at the 4 year dash at the NFL combined. I mean, he's already projected as a first rounder. He's also the question was to do for the competition as a later as a great senior versus better wide receivers. Also, his measurables we're always talking about the good like the reason to get acquisition for the first place because I know there's like a stat class for the quarterback, but also that the quarterback class he might be available, but it really shouldn't because I know there is gonna be the coaching right now, but I think that they're putting up in the case of clock issues that they can change the time if they needed to. Because the Jiminy is one of the best defensive players. It won't be the first one off the board, but it's going to be like in the top 15. The way that it goes, it'll be real about it. It'll be real.
I think Quinyon Mitchell, I did a podcast or a guest mock draft with this British podcast. A lot of guys in the UK are really, really into football. And I got to guest and I represented the Raiders. We did a mock draft where there were no trades. So I wasn't able to try and trade up to get a quarterback. I had to stand pat with the 13th pick. And I took Quinyon Mitchell because I think he's the perfect fit for Patrick Graham's defense. If you look at what Patrick Graham did in New York, he had a couple of cornerbacks in New York that were absolute studs. And Quinyon Mitchell fits that profile, and I would be very happy if we take him.
Yeah, we were happy because
just before because we were talking about Jared Valdir. Do you guys remember that?
What's that?
Can you see that picture?
Oh, I see it.
Yes,
I do remember that. Yeah.
Remember how much of a growth spurt he had, like from year one? Because I remember he was looking long and lean, but then like come year 4, like I remember that photo being shared around comparing him to the Incredible Hulk. May have been legal
he
or
took
not
his
legal.
Vitamins in that off season, didn't he?
What's that?
He looks like the Umbrella show on Netflix. He looks like the big guy from the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah,
maybe it's just me.
But he was jacked at one point, right? Especially like his growth spurt.
I do want to run back real quick and address Capitans, talking about the turn of the century team. Al Davis picked up a curse at some point because that should have been a back-to-back-to-back Super Bowl winning team. We had Tony Siragusa playing dirty and knocking Rich Gannon out. That was a Super Bowl year. We had the Tuck rule. That was a Super Bowl year. And then we stupidly had an argument with John Gruden and traded him away only for Bill Callahan to completely shit the bed and hand the Super Bowl trophy to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on a platter. That should have been one of the greatest dynasties in the history of the NFL. And
didn't our center go off the cuckoo as well? Just before
Barrett Robbins. He was bipolar, and I was actually like working in psychiatry at the time, and so like I knew exactly what was happening with him as soon as he disappeared and wound up manic in Mexico. Like, I mean, just. You couldn't ask for a more cursed beginning to the millennium. That was awful.
You know, they say sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Successful.
Right. It is better to be lucky than good.
Yep. Right.
I do want to point out, though, when we're talking about trading up for a quarterback, let's look at the last Super Bowl. The Super Bowl that was just in February, a couple of months ago. That Super Bowl was between a guy who was taken in the top 10, Patrick Mahomes, who his team traded up for. And on the other side was the guy who was taken with the last pick in the draft. So as long as you are a good organization who doesn't have any holes on either side of the ball, your quarterback can be the last pick in the draft or a UDFA or whoever you want. As long as you develop that guy, you can have success. Tom Brady is an excellent example. He went into a fantastic situation with probably the greatest coach of all time. Whenever he had success, he had fantastic defenses. He usually had good weapons to throw to it. He always had a fantastic offensive line. So, I mean, Tom Brady is, without question, the greatest quarterback of all time, but he didn't get there by himself. I mean, Tom Brady's talent had to be unleashed by a particular set of circumstances. And it is every organization's job to foster that set of circumstances for whoever they throw out there as their quarterback.
I agree. I mean, with Patrick Mahomes specifically, I mean, like, remember that draft class, he was like third or fourth on the like mock drafts in terms of like who was the best quarterback from that class. Who got
Mitch Trubisky was taken ahead of him.
Mitch Trubisky was the more touted prospect that year. Like, you know, Patrick Mahomes, like there was certain people that thought he was good, but nobody like knew that he was going to be the next big thing outside of maybe the Chiefs. I mean, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Like, they traded up to pick 10 to draft what's probably, like, as much as I hate to say it, it pains me to say it, the best quarterback of our generation and probably the last,
easily
12, 15 years. I mean, look at his resume. You know what I mean? But he came into
career. People look at his career at Texas Tech and they said, oh, no one in the Big 12 plays defense. So they disregarded the fact that he was out there throwing for 500 yards against freaking everybody. Well, you can't just do that. There's been plenty of Big 10 quarterbacks who don't do that. Patrick Mahomes did it. And he's translated it to the NFL like no one else has been able to.
Right. But like, he came into a very good situation. I mean, you know, there was no expectation for him. You know what I mean? Yeah, he was the first round draft pick, but like, it wasn't like he was pick number one, pick number two, where you're going to have to get thrown out into the fire immediately and expected to have the weight of the franchise right from day one. Because it wasn't, I think Alex Smith was still on their roster, and he was actually a decent game managing quarterback who could manage them wins. Not quite the winner that Patrick Mahomes is. And their roster wasn't too bad. Like, they just had some pieces that they needed to build around, but they absolutely hit it out of the ballpark. Very unfortunate for us, being that they're our main rivals, and you know what I mean, they're winning Super Bowls, whereas we're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Alex Smith, because he was like at the NFL for a game for a rookie. I mean, that could be because here's like the missing person, because that would be an disaster, because it would train like when Jimmy Graham caught like the touchdown to put like an up late, and no one freaked out because everyone wanted to play that Alice can do it, like not the 49ers. Of course, either was that did it. But I think that is always because remember the 2012 division playoff game against the Saints? I mean, one of the craziest moments that I just happened to the franchise, because I know that it is wonder because he completely rebuilt like his throwing mechanics for those. So there was like the fact that he was able to learn without having like throw out to the was immediately under the bat. Like Packers teams were the very huge deal. I mean, no one had the success with those teams in coaching. Whenever the Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes we have floundering, I mean, if Aaron Rodgers wasn't taken like at the first overall and ruined like a Hall of Fame career, I mean, they have it a different. Smith had a different coordinator every year by 5 straight seasons. Jimmy Ray, anyone? North Turner, year 2 was actually solid enough, but he just left it after 1 season. Also, let's just not forget about Scott McLaughlin. It should be credited with one of the most talented eventually acquired for those horrible teams, but also it became like a train wreck, and it just wasted like so many draft selections. Smith on the horrible Andy Reid, they're actually coaches, but it shows up that it was completely like if they're risk averse game manager, they could be as secure as like the offense. But also he just 8 coordinators in 7 seasons with the Niners. That team would have descended off for the success. But I think that it was probably in a good situations, but it's just been injury or replaced. I mean, they're gonna stuck it about the over like another players like that. But yes. Also, we just had another comment right there to say Juan Paredes could be the draft bad picks, but due to Mr. Davis being one of the least with the owners. Also, salute to you, Navy Bay. As it's going, because right now I see that the whole comment is right now because they just brought a lot of good points. And I know we're just talking about who got the best and worst draft picks in all history of the Raiders, and they just brought out a lot of good points on that show. And look at this, because right now the chat is showing up with great point of view, because that's what we needed for the talking about. Because that podcast, which is Silver and Black Experience, they just had a great point of view talking about who got the best about it. So, Fakasi, they
can I ask a question, especially if you read it, Johnson? Sorry, what was the top right?
Biggs.
Sorry, Biggs.
Yeah,
I think
Biggs.
41. Biggs and Ray Thomas. What would be in your time specifically, not like before your time or that you didn't know, but you've had to research, but during your time specifically, what was maybe your favorite draft class or two of your favorite draft classes and your 2 favorite draft picks in your time as a Raider fan?
I'll let you go first, Biggs.
I have to say, I was really excited about Henry Ruggs. I mean, obviously I was wrong about it, but that pick really excited me because I wanted that to be the pick, and that doesn't happen very often. And I, literally jumped up and ran around my house, like outside, like around the complex, screaming because I was so happy. Not a great look. And then I gotta say, Sebastian Janikowski is probably my favorite pick that we've ever had. I was in a hotel in Branson, Missouri, with my ex-wife on a trip, and I was in such shock, and I mean, I could not believe that we were taking a kicker in the first round, and it worked out. It was great.
What about class at the top of your time?
Class got to be 2014.
Yeah, that 2014 is definitely my favorite class as well. I think the draft pick that I was most excited about when it happened was probably Khalil Mack from the 2014 draft. I think the one that I didn't really like but turned out to be really, really good was from the 2003 draft, and that was Nnamdi Asomugha. Nnamdi, I knew sort of who he was because I watched a little, Pac-10 as it was known in those days. Pac-10.
Go Bears.
Living in Oregon at the time, but I wasn't able to watch as much Cal football as probably my Cal fan father would have liked, and so I didn't know how good Nnamdi was. And then he got to the league and was, basically God immediately. And so that's a pick I look pretty fondly on when I look back at it.
I do have to say real quick that my favorite pick of all time, or let's just say my favorite draft moment, was in 2016 when we took Connor Cook and made Jerry Jones so angry that he took Dak Prescott.
But it actually worked out for them, right? If they'd have taken Connor Cook, they would have been worse, unfortunately.
I do want to address the comment though about did Al not have good scouts? And I want to share something I learned on the website Reddit several years ago. Somebody actually went to a garage sale somewhere in California and was able to buy basically the book that the Raider scouts made up for the front office as far as who we should draft in 2010. I don't know how that thing got there, but it looked pretty legit. And the guy that the scouts liked the most in the 2010 draft, which was the Sam Bradford #1 overall pick draft, was Rob Gronkowski. They thought Rob Gronkowski was going to be an All-Pro player, possibly a Hall of Famer. They thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And of course, before Rob Gronkowski was picked, the Raiders selected Rolando McClain and Lamar Houston. And then Rob Gronkowski was picked after that. So let's not blame the scouts here. Al Davis had the information. He just decided to go a different direction.
How far did Rob Gronkowski slip?
Too fucking far.
Was he? Tell me he didn't fall out of the first round.
Let me look that up. I think he did.
Let's not forget though that Rolando McClain was the linebacker captain of Alabama, national champion, and one of the most historic defenses in the history of college football.
The right move on paper, it just turned out to be horribly wrong for us. I hate that guy, Rolando McClain. He's on my Mount Rushmore. I don't deserve.
Rob Gronkowski was taken in the second round with pick number 42 by the Patriots. So yeah, we passed on him twice.
To be fair, like you said, Biggs, like on paper, we needed a middle linebacker because remember we didn't have Kirk Morrison anymore or Thomas Howard, rest in peace. So linebacker was an area of need, but again, like, you know, hindsight's all good and great looking back now. But yeah, Rob Gronkowski, I mean, oh God. But like just in regards to like, I like your answers. You know, I remember that would be my answer too, Khalil Mack. I remember where I was at the time. I was actually in Bali. I got a photo of me. I took a selfie 5 minutes before we made the pick. And I remember screaming out loud at the TV, Khalil Mack, and sure enough, we took him, and the rest is history. And I don't watch too much college football, but like the reason why I was excited for Khalil Mack, because one day I was at home and I just turned on the TV. It was ESPN, and it was Ohio State, who I knew was a good team at the time, playing who the fuck are they team like Buffalo, right? And I don't know why, but I just sat down and I just was like, you know what, I'm just going to watch it. And that was the game. There was a guy who was making plays all over the place, sacking the quarterback, making interceptions and outrunning, like, you know, the wide receivers and tight ends to go for a touchdown, and just making plays all over the place. And I was like, who the hell is that guy? He is single-handedly almost winning the game for Buffalo against Ohio State. That player was Khalil Mack. And I told myself after I watched that game, I'm going to remember that name come draft time. And sure enough, we drafted him. And that was, for me, my favorite draft moment. Drafting him and Amari Cooper. I was super excited when we got Amari Cooper. And my favorite draft class would be that 2014 draft class. I really like that as a whole. And 2019, we got some guys as well. Like, you know, we flamed out badly with our first rounders, but being that we got Max Crosby, Hunter Renfrow, Foster Moreau, and Josh Jacobs, you know, yeah.
There were some monumental picks in 2014 and some monumental screw-ups as well. I'm going to go through the top 5 of the 2014 draft. Number 1, the Texans took Jadeveon Clowney, who's still in the league, playing at a pretty high level. Greg Robinson, tackle from Auburn, was taken by the Rams at number 2. Blake Bortles was taken by the Jaguars at number 3. Sammy Watkins was taken by the Bills at number 4. And then the Raiders took Mack at number 5. And let me skip down a little bit here. At number 13, the Rams took Aaron Donald. Now, Aaron Donald was available for anybody, including the Raiders, before pick number 13. Aaron Donald at the time was known as a slightly short, undersized defensive tackle and turned out to be basically the greatest defensive player we've seen in the last 30 years. So the draft is absolute insanity. You can get somebody in the middle of the first round on that level, you know, if you do your scouting right. But I mean, of Khalil Mack and Aaron Donald, who would you rather have had at 5 looking back?
Well, let me just remind everybody that even though Aaron Donald is a first ballot unanimous Hall of Famer and gold jacket wearer, Khalil Mack is still the only defensive player to be named an All-Pro at 2 different positions in the same season. So Aaron Donald can suck on that.
And Khalil Mack in his Raider days, remember, he had pretty much little to no help. He was willing the team to victory almost single-handedly on the defensive side of the ball. You know what I mean? That guy for me is on my Mount Rushmore of the 4 when it comes to the 4 best defensive players in the last 2.5 decades for the Raiders: Charles Woodson, Khalil Mack, Max Crosby, and Nnamdi Asomugha. You know what I mean? Like,
I just wish
Khalil Mack
I wish he could have played one season across from Max Crosby. Mack and Crosby on either side of the defensive line would have been absolute.
There's still a chance.
It would have been amazing. Oh man, it would be awesome. Mack is getting a little bit long in the tooth, but I think
let's run it back.
Like, I'm usually against hiring older talent. Like, I mean, I was very apprehensive with the Chandler Jones signing. Look how that turned out. But like, the only exception I would make for selfish maybe reasons is Khalil Mack. And to be fair, like, Khalil Mack, like, look at how much he produced last season with the Chargers. I mean, how many sacks did he get? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's still a very highly productive player. But I do remember at one point he was up there with the likes of J.J. Watt, Aaron Donald, and Khalil Mack, Von Miller, all of them when they were in their prime as being the best defensive player in the league.
I'm not one to buy current player jerseys just because of the state of free agency and everything, but I do have a Khalil Mack jersey that I was wearing on our show last night, and I was a season ticket holder at the Coliseum at that time, and I remember the game where he had his pick 6. It was against Buffalo or Indianapolis. It was a blue team. I don't remember the exact game. But he had a pick 6 close to the end zone, and he just like jumped up, batted a pass down, snatched it out of the air, and ran it back for a touchdown, like 5 or 6 yards. And the Coliseum is like absolutely going nuts. And that was a heyday. Definitely a fun time to be a Raider fan.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I remember because last year I just watched all the draft picks, and that was like the first time that I was doing like a live stream with my brothers. Yeah, there it is. But I think that there it is, because I have a jersey of Khalil Mack, which is on white, because I just getting it up because I have one jersey which is the white one, which is a Khalil Mack, and I still got it because right now it feels like very incredible. But I figured it out because last year when I was doing like a live stream with some content creators, and I just figured it out how very big is important about for the draft picks. And when I just heard about for the name of Michael Mayer, like the tight end from Notre Dame, I was really shocked because that was just like one of the first times that I get a reaction, and it was just like the first time that I was like getting involved with all the draft picks. But then I figured it out that I just revisited all the draft picks and all the history of the Raiders organization. I really thought that some draft picks could be great, some drafts could be worse. But at the end of the day, no matter what happens, you're a Raider because you have to represent the whole nation. If you're going to play with much aggression, more defense, and of course, more discipline. And as a matter of fact, because before we just shut it down right now, because it's been like a great episode, because we've been discussing for the best and worst draft picks in the whole history for the Raiders organization. But I can't talk about this, and I've been telling for this one. The Raiders are not the Patriot way. It's the motherfucking Raiders way. Deal with it. Because we are representing the whole nation, and we got the best of the defense. And I know that we just dumped Josh McDaniels, so fuck Josh McDaniels, fuck Dave Ziegler. We just got Antonio Pierce, Tom Telesco. I know he's working it out before for the years for the Los Angeles Chargers, but he has mentality, he has a great experience. But I got to tell you for this one, the whole Raider Nation is not going to leave anywhere because it's still there. No matter if you're living in the United States, Australia, United Kingdom, Mexico, it's everywhere because you cannot fuck with us with the nation. Because during for all of the time right now for the 2023 season, I know this is like an ups and downs, but we still have a lot of holes to get improved with a lot of offense, the defense, and the special teams. But you better watch out, ladies and gentlemen, because the whole competition we just got for the Chiefs, Denver Broncos, I just wanted to say it. watch your mouth, Chiefs fans, Chargers fans, Denver Broncos fans, because we're coming at hot right now. And I gotta tell you for this one, it's been another great special episode for Civil and Black Experience because we just discussed for the best and worst draft picks. So I just wanted to tell you, thanks for Cassie Raider, part of the Raider War Order, too sweet. Also, Biggs and Raider Damus for the Raiders Unrivaled, the Unstoppable, because they just had a podcast on YouTube discussing for the Raider news, also for stats, also because I know that my voice was really breakdown, but I'm still recovering for the boys. And even though that I can speak a little bit slower, a little bit fast right now, but there you go. So last thoughts about before we just wrap it up, ladies and gentlemen. Last thoughts. First, we got Avocasi, then Biggs and Raider Damus. Last thoughts.
Thanks for having me on the show. Oh, sorry, who's first? Biggs
No.
or me?
No, you're first.
Yeah,
No, Biggs, if you want to go first, you go. I bet.
yeah.
No. I was just waiting. You started. Go.
Okay. Sorry, I thought he said me first. My apologies, guys. Thanks for having me on, Ralph. Appreciate you, man. Look, final thoughts. Let's see how it shakes out. I mean, you've always got to give 3 years to give a fair assessment of how a draft class has panned out. You know, unless the guy gets cut or whatever happens and he's not a Raider anymore after his first season or 2 seasons, then you can give a final analysis on the player. But until they've had their 3rd year, you know what I mean? Like, because it takes 3 years for you to give them a fair assessment as to whether they got it or they don't. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, I give concessions for your first 2 seasons for development as long as you're trending upwards or showing some potential. You know what I mean? But come year 3, you have to come around. So, you know, I'm looking at, like, you know, last year's draft class to me has been very underwhelming so far, but like it's just been 1 year, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna give them a fair shake in the next year or 2. But, you know, Telesco, I'm excited to see what he does with the draft. Like, you know, I've heard a lot of good things about what he's done with the recent history with the Chargers when it comes to drafting, but I got to be honest, I don't care. I don't care what he did for other teams. I only care what he does for us, and I want to see him, you know what I mean, do his thing. And hopefully this draft class can be the beginning, as well as the piece we already have, of a long and glorious future for our Raiders, because we've suffered long enough. And
we rise again.
You know, hopefully it's the start of the rise. And I truly believe with Antonio Pierce being retained as head coach and what he showed flashes of what he's able to how he's able to lead the team when he was given the chance. I believe we have the right pieces on board. It's just a matter of it all coming together. But I'm willing to, I stress, just give it time. You know what I mean? Let's not expect Super Bowl year 1. If it can happen year 1, fantastic. But give it time. We will get to glory and where we need to be. Bank on it. Thanks for having me on, Rafa. Appreciate you guys. And Biggs, ready to
There you go.
Yeah.
Big
Similar
C,
sentiment
Mm-hmm.
to Tom Telesco as Luke Getsy. I don't care what he did in Chicago. I don't care what he did in Green Bay. I want to see what he will do with the Raiders. And that's it. Thanks for having me on, Rafa. Everybody who's watching, go over to the Undroppables YouTube channel and find Raider Damas and I every Thursday night at 8 o'clock live streaming, 8 o'clock West Coast, live streaming the Raiders Uncovered series, Unrivaled. And we'd love to have, I love when the comment section, and usually Rafucho is leading the charge. I love it when the comment section just starts lighting up. It hasn't happened for a couple weeks. We're missing you guys, so get on over there on Thursday nights and check us out. It's a fun show.
What's the? Can you tell me the?
So the Undroppables is the umbrella, and we have a
YouTube.
There's the Raiders Unrivaled. Yes, Undroppables.
Uncovered is the series, and it's basically each. There's one content creator for every team, and I have the Raiders, so I do a roundtable show with Raider Damas. Other special guests, Kenny King Jr. comes on every once in a while. Big Corey came on; he popped in one time. Marcus Johnson's been on there. KTG Know the Game comes on. That's it. The Undroppables.
There you go. The Undroppables.
Yeah.
There you go. So you have a great content from football, and then you go.
You got yourself a stop.
Because they just brought a lot of great stuff. And Raider Damas, do you have your last thoughts before we wrap
this
up?
I do. My last My last thoughts are very short and sweet. You, Capitan, mentioned that you don't want the Charger fans coming around here making a bunch of noise and being loud. I wouldn't worry about that because 10 people aren't very loud together. And that's all I got for you tonight.
I will tell you for this one, because this episode is getting it's getting bigger, bolder, and of course better, because we had the 3 Bs. Because right now it is time to say goodbye, and of course, thanks for having us at this special episode of Simon Black Experience. Don't forget to hit the like button. Also, subscribe to Rafael Chacín, as known as El Capitán Rafucho, on YouTube. You can follow me on social media at Twitter, Instagram, all those social medias, and of course, ring the bell for the notifications if I'm available to tweak a video of a live stream. And of course, I just wanted to tell you, in the name of the Raider Nation right now, with some special guests, Alpha Kasi Raider, Big C, Raider Damus, I just wanted to say all for the Raider Nation right now. Just like Al Davis said, just win, baby. And look at the middle finger right now. Fuck the Chiefs, fuck the 49ers, fuck the Cowgirls, fuck the Chargers, fuck the Broncos. Raider Nation for life, motherfuckers. And there you have it. Have a great weekend. Have a great night. And of course, let's scream at a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Raiders. There you have it, folks. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. And of course, Raider Nation for life. So let's get to it. So right now, peace out. Yep. There you go.